7 o'clock. I'm going to call the village board meeting to order. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please have all cell phones silenced during the meeting. I look for approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 5, public appearances and citizens' comments. No debate will occur with the board on items introduced by citizens. Items will not be acted upon at this meeting, but will be referred to the proper staff or committee if action is required. Please keep comments to 3 minutes. Nothing? Okay.
Just sit there and listen.
Okay, absorbing? Okay, item 6, approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move approval. I'll second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Item 7, Finance and Personnel Committee, discussion, consideration, resolution 1911, administrator's employment contract. We've got it in front of you. We did a little negotiating on the salary. We ended up at the 76 that we decided at the top. We discussed a little bit on vacation, but we kind of held fast on that one. What else was there? I don't remember.
6 months severance is the other challenge.
Yeah, which we had talked about the other day, right?
Yeah.
Without cause.
Okay. Yeah.
Things we talked about.
Do you need a motion on it?
Yep.
Then I would move that we approve the resolution 1911, the administrator employment contract.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Enthusiasm.
Yay. And
Okay.
staff was excited too, I talked to a couple of
Yeah.
staff, sure.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Item 8. Yeah, I'm just gonna say, we have, either we can approve one at a time, or we can approve them as a group when we're done discussing it, however you wanna do it. But Dave Ferris is here from Ellers, and he will make a presentation and ask any questions, answer any questions that you have.
You want me up there?
Sure, that's fine.
Sorry, you just got ink.
Standing or sitting?
No,
Okay.
Whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Sounds good. So thank you very much for letting us come here tonight. We appreciate you using Ellers, and I'm happy to be here to present your pre-sale report and kind of tell you a little bit about why we're presenting the method of sale that we are. What you have in front of you is what's called a pre-sale report. We use this document basically to memorialize some of the planning that we've gone through with staff and some of the process. And we put it into a document so that that's kind of the basis for our recommendation to the board as far as how you should proceed with this year's financing of the project. So if you turn to the first page, this is the 2019 A General Obligation Corporate Purpose Bonds. The initial resolutions resolutions for these bonds will total $1,580,000. That is a not to exceed number. When we put together the issue, a lot of the fees are estimates. A lot of times they don't shake out until we get to the end. For instance, the bond counsel, typically Lynn wouldn't even get a letter from the bond counsel for another week or two. I know that she contacted him today to find out that the number that we have in here is a couple thousand more. As well as, there's items in here that are, the underwriter's discount is actually a bid item. So that's how an underwriter gets paid for their bid. And if they don't take the whole amount, then that number will change. And I'll get it, when we get to the page where it shows the fees, we can talk a little bit more about those. But those are, most of those change on the sale day because this is a bid and they're putting in their bid, and that changes not only what the interest rate we use is, but how much they might take for compensation and so forth. So the purpose of this bond is to finance your 2019 projects, which I believe is 3rd Street, which includes water, sewer, streets, and stormwater improvements. We're also pulled into this the sewer revenue bond anticipation note. It's actually matures next year, but since there's a chance that maybe you wouldn't do a borrowing that's related to the sewer utility next year, we were able to, it was already callable, so we're going to call that early. It saves you in, if you had to do a separate issue, it'll save you that you won't have to have fees to issue that bond next year. So we rolled it into this year to save you some money on the issuance fees there. The reason that we are suggesting a bond be used in this case is because you have a little bit of an issue with your sewer and your stormwater utilities where they don't have enough, excuse me a second. They dry out a little bit when I'm talking so much. They don't have the coverage amounts that they need to be able to pay these bonds off in a 10-year period so that they could be notes. And so what we did is we stretched those to 15 years. You're probably going to need to, especially on the stormwater utility, you're going to need to take a look at that coverage because it's probably around 77 cents right now, and it ought to be about $1 of revenue for each cost or each dollar of expense. So it's something you might want to look at, but we had to stretch that out so that didn't keep trending downwards. The sewer utility has a requirement on the revenue bonds of, I think that's a 105 coverage ratio, but that's only applies to that issue, but we wanted to make sure that you stated at least one with the general obligation on top of that, so that's why we stretched this out to a 15-year bond, because that coverage is really, it's kind of something you have to be able to pay off your bonds. The water utility doesn't have an issue, and it has more than enough coverage, but the storm and the sewer are a little bit low on those, and that's something we could talk about another time if you're looking to do something about your rates. Why don't we turn to the project schedule, which also includes the issuance cost. That's on page 6 of our document.
I think it's 17 of the,
Yeah.
put it in the packet, so.
That's kind of why I said page 6 of our document, because I figured you probably had some other numbering. It makes it even more interesting when people use the TV screens to do this, because they're like, okay, how do we get to that? Anyway, so what you'll see here is these are the costs that were provided to us by village staff. I believe your engineer provided these to you, and so the numbers that went into the project cost came from your engineer. You've got the streets for a cost of $439,000, the storm and sewer $312,000, sewer $208,000, water $240,000. Then you'll see that we have the $325,000 sewer bond anticipation note refunding. The principal will be due on 5/21 because I think there's like a 35-day call period to be able to pay those off. So I think that'll go from It probably is from today, or there's some, whenever we were able to make that call, then it's a 35-day period, and so that's the first day that you'll be able to make that payment on those called bonds. We assume that there's interest on hand to pay that whopping $307 of interest that's due from the last payment date to that date of that call date. Okay. So that gives you total project needs of $1,526,000. And after issuance expenses with some interest earnings on what you might have on hand during the construction period, and a little bit of rounding to get it to an even dollar amount, which is bonds are typically bonds are normally a $5,000 increment. That gave us a size issue as a not to exceed number of $1,580,000. Any costs or any questions on this page of the issuance costs or anything?
Yeah, I'd like to just have you go through the issuance expenses.
Sure.
Maybe give us a little bit more detail on that $58,000.
Yeah. So the bond counsel, as I told you, Lynn contacted Brian Lancer at Quarles and Brady, and he, you know, they typically, like I said, they typically send out a letter that says what their fee is, but you usually don't get it until we get closer to the sale date. So that's actually going to be $9,000 for their services. We are not using disclosure counsel, but what we have seen lately is that more and more places are. So when we go into this initial meeting, we put it in, and it's something that, you know, if you're not going to use it and you don't have Quarles do anything for you on the sale day, that gets eliminated and helps bring down how much either you're issuing, or sometimes you might decide that you want to put some money aside for the next year's interest expense, because when we get to the page that shows you what happens to the interest or the tax levy, you'll see there's a bump up for 1 year, so it's possible you might want to use some of that savings of what the bonds came in at to go towards debt service. Otherwise, if you'd rather, your choice is that or to reduce the size. So, you know, right off the bat, you're able to cut a bond off just because of disclosure. So we'd be down to $1,575,000 already. The disclosure counsel, which talked about the paying agent. So the only reason that we would recommend that you use a paying agent is if the underwriter, when they do their bid, does what they call term bonds. And what they might do is take a couple of years at the beginning or at the end and lump them together. What's tricky about that is because when they lump those together, one of the years has to have a call, a mandatory call. And so to pay off that next year, that second piece of that term bond, you have to send out notifications of call. And the problem is that when you have maybe a clerk treasurer that's going to retire soon, that sometimes these things that are down the street a bit might get lost in the shuffle between new people coming on. So we recommend, and you don't have to, and this is totally your choice, but we recommend that you use a paying agent, because then we're the ones that are sending out that call. If you miss that call date, then you've really kind of, what do you call it, I can't think of the term. It's a reportable condition because you have not paid it on time. And so what will happen is that will get reported to Emma, and it could affect some of your borrowing capabilities in the future. So that's why we, you know, if they term up any of these bonds, that you're going to want to think about using that, because otherwise you can get yourself in trouble down the road. The underwriter fee is in here as, I think it's at 0.125%. That's kind of a high end of what they would take for compensation. So this is the people that bid on your bonds will take some or all of that. And a lot of times that, you know, that's a bid item. So what they'll do is they'll take less to try to get the bid. And what that does is that, you know, that gives you more savings. You're able to either apply that to your debt service or to reduce the size of the bond. So it's one of their ways to bring down the cost of their bid for you to decide on. So
but it shouldn't run any more than
19 would be the high end, and I don't see them taking that very often. But that, we put that in as, you know,
Who's the underwriter?
whoever wins your bid. So hopefully we're gonna get 3 or more bids, and each one of those are gonna be underwriters. So Baird is an underwriter. What used to be, I think, Associated Bank is an underwriter. Bankers Bank is an underwriter. So, you know, like, we've seen up to like 13 bidders on certain issues. You know, we typically see like 3 to 5.
Sorry, 2 questions.
Sure.
What can we anticipate the interest rate to be, just anticipating what you, on these bonds that we purchased, or that are?
Well, we came in with a preliminary run using a little bit more. If you go, you might as well go on to page 7. Page 7 really takes the interest rates on a recent sale of a non-rated bond, which is an A-rated bond. If you don't get rated, then you're basically an A-rated bond. So what we've done is we've taken a recent sale from 222 and put a conservative 45-cent kind of safety blanket on it, just in case. Because the one thing we don't want to do is if interest rates start going crazy and we come back here in 6 weeks, because I think we're avoiding the 30-day rule, right, Lynn? So
We're coming back
the
on.
16th, right?
Right, yeah,
So,
April.
yeah, there's a funky thing going on in the underwriter world where it's a little more of a big deal at city level because there's a 30-day period where the public can say no. We don't want you to sell these bonds, and so they can force kind of a referendum type of situation. In the case of a village, you have to have over 50% of your electorate make a petition to not do a sale. And it's a lot harder because, you know, how many times do you get 50% of your electorate in for elections? So, I mean, it's a tough thing to do. So we're talking about 6 weeks between now and when you sell your bonds, and who knows what interest rates are gonna do. So we're a little conservative on what we think they're gonna be, but, you know, the way the interest rates have been going, we're hoping you get that rate that's more of the 222 rate, not that 45 cents. But we like to be a little conservative going in so that when we come back here on sale day, you don't look at us and say, you promised us $2 or 2.29%, and you didn't come anywhere close to it. So.
I don't know, did you have more, or I don't
Sure.
know if my question relates at this point?
You can go ahead and ask if you want.
Is it generally the rule of thumb to amortize out with an annual payment? Wouldn't it be in our best interest? Wouldn't it be best for us to do a monthly payment on that rather than wait annually and collect all of that, have all that interest?
Well, that's not typically something you do at a bond level. That would be
Okay, I
more of
didn't
your
know.
local bank.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically in the open market, when you do a competitive bid,
So it's usually.
it's a semi-annual interest payment and an annual principal payment.
Then I have 2 more. Will we go out and seek some of these locally?
Well, Bankers Bank is typically a bank that will work with your local bank.
Okay.
If they do win the bid, which there's plenty of places, like I was in Mazomanie, almost a year ago. Bankers Bank wins a bunch of these, and if they work with the local bank, Bank New Glarus, or is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
If that's the winning bid, we will mention for sure when we're here that they participated in the bid and that they won it. So.
And then, the last question I have is, what does this borrowing do to our self-imposed
Okay.
cap?
Is that okay if we talk about that?
Sure.
Because I actually have another handout for you that kind of shows, because what we did for you, because Lynn wanted you to get a picture for where we are with the ability to do a library project, there's a park project out there, and then we kind of threw in like a 2022 street project that looks just like the one you're doing today, because we weren't really sure, just to kind of show you how that impacts your debt capacity. So I'm gonna I'll show you what the current issue looks like in here, but I've got a handout for you that'll show you that we're in pretty good shape to do those projects, and that your debt capacity is not gonna hold you back if you decide to go forward with those projects. So, okay, so are we good on the issuance cost page? Does anybody else have a question on that? Okay, so page 7 is how we're breaking out the different funding sources of this borrowing. So the street portion will be levied. The storm sewer has a user fee, which, as we talked about, the coverage is a little bit weak there. It's something you may want to look at to be able to pay for these. Stretching this out helped, but it definitely is something that there's a concern there as being able to pay that off as running through the stormwater utility. The water utility has $250,000, and the sewer utility, the combination of the street project and that revenue bond refunding is in that sewer utility amount. And as you can tell, we went out 15 years on the streets and the sewer and the storm sewer. The sewer, we didn't have to go out quite 15. I thought it was 15 before we said that. But what we did is we actually did over here to the right, which you can't see because it's on my spreadsheet, is a coverage kind of test over there. Sorry. If I had my computer with me, there's a little calculation over here, and we wanted to make sure you at least had a coverage of 1 on that. And so that's why that one only went out that far, because after that 2029, you have more than enough coverage, so we cut it off there. Okay? The next page, page 8, is how the debt issue affects your tax levy. The first section there, the existing debt payments, is everything that you've approved before this year, including any bank notes that you did even through the end of the year. We were very conservative with your growth. You've had some good growth in the past, but when we talked to Lynn, we kind of we didn't want to hang our hat on a really good growth rate, because if we do, it makes that tax rate look really good to the right, but if it doesn't come true, it could really mess up how things are structured. So the more conservative we are, the better we can structure that, and that way, if we do get better growth, you're even more flexible as far as doing more borrowings in the future if you have those projects to borrow for. So the next column, the third column on the left, is your total principal and interest for general obligation debt. The less non-levy revenues is really your it's abatement revenues from the water utility or the sewer utility or the stormwater utility. And the reason we take those away is because we want to get down to what you're just going to levy for. And so that net debt service levy should match up to what Lynn and the village board approved in the budget as far as a levy for debt service. Then you take that amount divided by the equalized value that we have in the first column, and that gives you your existing debt structure before you go into a potential new debt. And as you can tell, those numbers are falling pretty nicely each year, and that is a really good sign. Just so you know, that's the kind of structure you want to see in your debt levy rate, is because if you have anything going on here that you're going to need to do some borrowing, you've got plenty of flexibility to pop it in there without your debt service rate going crazy. Because the one thing you don't want is your residents in here yelling at you because the mill rate's going up and down, because I'm sure you don't like to see that anyways. You guys come in and help Lynn collect, right?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
The county doesn't.
I sat and Drake wasn't at Wanakee at this point, but we had a resident would come in and say, we put out some of the treats that the vendors would leave us, and the guide said, well, we don't think you should give this, we think we should have caviar because of how much we pay you. And he wasn't smiling, so we had some really fun people, but, so the next section is the,
Can I just
go
ask
ahead.
a question quick? On the projected growth rate thing. You've used a really low rate.
I don't think that is really low.
we really need to, I don't see any serious growth here in the next 5 or 10 years.
Okay. Yeah, and that's why we went down to 1%. Lynn thought that was a good number to use.
Did you think that it, do you think it, I mean,
No, I think that's great. I'm not sure about the change in value of 2019.
Oh, that's actual. That's actually per the
That's
state.
actual.
Yep. Yep, that's right in the DOR's website.
Okay.
So you had a really good, you had a great year of growth in the equalized value.
Okay.
we did a residential revalue.
That's
and
why.
that's part of it.
Did the assessor find a bunch of things that weren't recorded? Is that why?
No, but everything went up.
Yeah.
Well, that's your assessed value. I mean, the only reason your equalized value would go up in a reassessment if you had a bunch of people that did their basements and didn't get a building permit. Because that's
Because
value
our-
that's not
remember, our
recorded.
ratio dropped.
The ratio dropped, the total valuation.
Okay.
Of course, like it always does.
I wonder if the value went down because of the personal
The
property.
only other thing I don't know about is, did any commercial things come in?
Would have been 18, 17
Could have
construction.
Casey's,
Yeah,
could have,
yeah,
Casey's could
Casey's
have come
probably
in.
completed.
What about the
year,
feed
for sure.
And the feed store in the east.
That came in and,
Yeah, so you're,
yeah,
Some of those finished.
I have a list of those things, but I didn't bring them along, so.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure when they did, but I'm guessing
Yeah,
possibly
Yeah, the
those
beer
two.
house,
I think the-
And then we had the liquor store,
Right, because they don't come in until they're.
right.
Yeah.
We looked, we, about a year out.
so that's gonna be the 17 construction year that came on the tax roll for the 18, which applies to the 19 mill rate, so. It's kind of goofy, because this schedule is different than the one I'll show you for the debt limit, because the debt limit is, 1/1/18 is what your December 31st 18 debt limit is based off of, but your valuation for doing the mill rate is like a year different, so.
Well, I'm just happy to see the
Yeah.
full projection.
Yeah, and if you come in better, obviously that'll make
And
that.
we'll have caviar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
If we liked it.
Plan for the worst, hope for the best, right?
The next section is the new bonds. So on the previous page where we showed you the repayment schedule, those hopefully line up. They total the same. And using the interest rates that we have projected with a little cushion at this point, that kind of gets you to the total financing related to these projects and the refunding. Then from those new bonds, there's other sources that are going to pay for those debt payments. So you've got your stormwater utility, your water revenues, your sewer utility, and then there's a little bit of money that, because there is an interest payment in the fall, because we're borrowing now, there's an amount of $6,700 that Lynn said that there was money available in the fund balance to pay those instead of you borrowing to make that first interest payment, which we didn't want to put any more into the borrowing than that. So that's an amount that you're going to use from fund balance.
That's in the debt service
Debt
fund
service.
balance, not general.
Right.
So what do we use for a basis for the revenues?
Those are actually the debt payments for, so if you went back to, for instance, the storm sewer has total debt payments of 423. That, okay. That makes me wonder a little bit. That number's a little bit off. I'll have to go back and look at
In
that
the
one.
storm
So-
sewer one?
Yeah, the storm sewer is off a
For
little
the
bit.
less abatement?
And the abatement column's not as much as it should be. The sewer's fine and the water's fine, so actually there's probably some additional,
Oh, I was just looking at the first year.
it looks like it's missing the last 2 years. So down a little bit farther, after that $42,000 in the storm sewer column, there's actually 2 more years, which will make the tax rate look even better way out in 2033 and 34. It's a good thing I showed you that. But, at that point, you know, it's not affecting today, and we'll fix that, but, you know, it will make your 2033 and 2034 tax rate look a lot better even. Okay? So that'll bring that, you know, that'll bring those numbers down from like the 78s down more into like the, you know, 50s or so. Okay?
Dave, I don't know, and we maybe missed talking about this.
What's that?
So we will special assess curb gutter sidewalk.
On this project?
Yeah. We missed talking about that, didn't we?
Yeah, we
only
did.
That's only gonna help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to talk to Dawn. Well, this is a not to exceed, so we can make some changes to it yet and bring this down. Okay.
What do we anticipate in terms of that?
Can you send me what those dollar amounts will be, or estimates?
Yeah. Their estimate. Looks like the estimated total of those is 56,328.
Do you have it like, are they payable up front, or is it over a specific amount
We
of
give
time?
them 6 years.
Okay. So do you want to give us a proposed schedule of when you think those will come in? Because that, you know, that obviously makes a difference on how we structure the debt
We
payments.
can talk about that.
Yeah, I don't remember
Yeah.
having that conversation.
Yeah, they're allowed, I mean, obviously, if they want to pay it up front, they can
Yep.
pay it up front. But if they choose not to, we'll put it on the tax roll for 6 years and we'll charge 1%
Okay.
over prime for interest.
Okay.
So it's kind of a guess at what'll come in any given year.
Yeah, and,
But we should probably
Yeah.
include it in.
yeah, definitely, because we don't need to borrow as much if you've got that coming in. Absolutely. But I'll touch base with Dawn, and we'll get that fixed in the documents, and that way, when they actually bid on the issue, that'll be something that we can have them reduce it by.
Sorry, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's a great catch, though. I'm glad you thought of it today instead of the day of the sale, because it's too late at that point.
Yeah.
So that comes in, we can see it under Pat's figures, under the
Yeah.
contractors, maybe it's not total, but,
I'll need it by,
That's what I was looking
but
at, was
the
Pat's.
actual, at least linear footage or square footage cost. I don't know if I saw an actual,
and if you have it broken out by purpose, so if it's if you're making them pay by storm or water or sewer.
It would just be curb gutter and
Oh, is it
sidewalk.
just street? Okay.
did we get this?
I think it's in the, is it in the packet? No, no, it
We saw a
was,
list of who would be
Yeah.
assessed, but we didn't get numbers.
it comes to Public Works, Public Safety next week.
Oh,
You're
okay,
having a
so
public
it's,
hearing on it. Yeah,
okay.
but I'll make sure that Dave gets that.
Yeah,
Leave it out.
because we can give you kind of an update of what it looks like then, because you'll want to know what your numbers are going into the sale then. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Good to know. That helps?
Every little bit helps.
You betcha, you betcha. Okay, so then we get down to the total projected debt service less those abatements, that money coming from the other sources, and special assessments will kick into here as well, which will bring you down to the net debt service levy, which will be lower because of that amount that's coming from special assessments that will apply against that levy portion of this borrowing. And so those numbers aren't quite in the ballpark, you know, they're a little bit off now, but as you can tell, after you take that service levy divided by your equalized value, we have that structure that you want to see in your tax rate still occurring where it's falling over time, giving you that flexibility to do more projects in the future if they come up. Okay? And then not knowing, you know, I don't think we ever talked about an average valued house. What's been in here has been $250,000. I can run it with a number that's more in line with what the village wants to use, because that cell itself is just, you change the number and it changes all the dollars falling. But if a $250,000 house is meaningful in the village, you can see, you know, that part of, you know, the debt service levy equates to those numbers, and you can tell by the change in the amounts how that actually is, their bill is actually going down over time. Now, if you were to be, you know, we've got clients that do annual borrowings, and so that tax rate, that 268 or 274 or whatever it is, we try, you know, every year we try to hit that same number, and so what happens is that resident should not see an increase in taxes, because we're always getting it right back to that same amount, because every year they're doing that. You're gonna have probably years where it'll come down until you do your next project. You know, it's not in this version, but if I were to show you the structure as we kind of have it now with the library in it, you're gonna see a blip for the library, because it's, you know, it's $1 million out there. And then there's another little bump up probably where we put that potential future street project. So, okay, any questions on the debt structuring page? The next page is the debt limit calculation with just this year's issue. Okay. So, yeah, the column that says this year's issue seems to be hidden, but if you tell the difference between the principal outstanding in the green versus the principal outstanding in the yellow, that is the current year issue.
We don't have colors.
Oh. All right, so this is green right here, and that column has the principal outstanding, and that's a little bit higher. There should be a column showing right there, so I will send you a new copy of that once we have the new borrowing. There should be a column showing that new issue, but the difference between the two is how that issue impacted it. So if you look at the percentages, you can see, you know, there was a bump up to like, let's see. Well, it's just the. Oh, this is the whole. I was thinking that was a lot of money, but really what it is that's the whole issue. So the $1.6 million is coming in here, and so that's taking you from, you know, for the 2019 issue or line, you've got 4.8 million. $1.6 million onto that 4.8 million is 6.4 million. So your debt limit going into the borrowing was about 48%. This borrowing will take you up to 63%. Okay. Then I did include a page that kind of shows what the rates have done over the last 5 years. Just for your information, we're still at pretty good interest rates. We're still, in a market that has, extremely good rates, a lot better than they were, when I first started at Waunakee. But we just wanted to kind of show you where things are. They're kind of bopping around, but they aren't really taking the big jump like they were in the fall. Then back on page 1, which I don't remember what page that is for you, Lynn, but it's the first page of the executive summary.
Oh, the title sheet is 11, so.
Okay. So a little bit farther down the page is the term call feature. The bonds are issued for a term of 15 years. The payments will be on May 1 of 2020 through 2034, beginning. The interest will begin in November of 19. But we do have a call date in here. So at May 1st, 2027, on May 1st, 2027, you can call anything that is coming due from 2028 through 2034. So at that time, if it makes good financial sense to prepay those and refund those into a lower interest rate, you'll have that opportunity at that date. And just so you know, and I think you're aware of this, and Lynn is for sure, we analyze your debt on an annual basis to see if there's any refunding opportunities. And so we're always monitoring to make sure that we're giving you advice on whether you can improve your interest rates. So the next page, page 2, method of sale and placement. In order to get you the lowest interest cost, we are recommending that you competitively bid these to underwriters and regional underwriters and banks. So anybody that wants to bid, they can submit a bid. Our bond department sets up that site that they can put a bid in, and it's open to anybody that's willing to bid on them. The more the better, actually. So we'll tabulate those bids, and then we'll make a recommendation to you on sale day that says what the lowest true interest cost is. And we'll be back here with a report you've probably seen before. Maybe Jim Mann did it, where they listed every one of the underwriters that did. On the next page, no, actually there's nothing on that page that I want to talk about. On the 4th page, under risk factors. So the risk that you have that we talk about here really is the fact that those other utilities are responsible for a share of the repayment of the debt. If those utilities do not have enough money to make that payment, the risk is that the village would have to levy a tax to cover it. So, it's something that you want to make sure you've got the coverage, especially I think in the stormwater utility. I think you have enough in the sewer and the water utility to cover those, but something you'll want to make sure you have the money from the users on that to be able to make those payments, unless it's your intention to have the levy pay for some of that storm money. Okay? So we need to let you know that what we show up front for a tax rate assumes that those other entities are going to make their payments. Okay? The other service providers that you'll see that participate in this is Quarles and Brady. And like I said, if there are term bonds, then we would recommend that you use Bond Trust Services Corporation, which I think you've used if there's been term bonds in the past. The next page has our calendar of events. We're here tonight to present the pre-sale report. Obviously, we've got some changes based on some of our discussion. We'll do a due diligence call the week of April 1st just to go through the official statement. The official statement's what we put together that goes out to the bidders. That has a whole bunch of information on a lot of the financial information, some of the building permits, some good information about what the economics are in New Glarus. So that's something that has to be done for bidding out in a service like, or for a bid like this. It's a pretty significant document that's required for that type of thing. And then we'll be back on the 16th, the day that the bonds will sell, to give you an update on how things went, hopefully give you great news. On the closing date on May 7th, you should be able to get your money so that you'll be able to start making payments on your construction. And then on the 21st, some of the money that came in will be used to refund that sewer revenue bond. Then the last thing that I have that's outside of the pre-sale report, I'll just take one and I'll pass it down. This actually does show all the issues. So this is kind of, Lynn wanted to talk about this because I think that there's been some concern from like the library, because it was in Waunakee. Do you have enough capacity to build a new building? In Waunakee, they kept on telling us that we were purposely putting them off. So what we wanted to do is give you kind of a how do things look if we have kind of an all-in scenario, and all-in being what Lynn thought was potential projects over the next 3 or 4 years. Okay? So we've
So
got,
we can just so they know, so we can change these
Yep.
and rerun this any way that
Oh,
you,
yeah.
you know, that if you guys are thinking something different, just say.
well,
it.
and we'll do this at any time of the year. I mean, if you call us during the year and you want us, like, if you're getting closer to making a decision on the library, we'll run scenarios for you. We may not do any issue of debt until the next year, but it's something that we're willing to do. You know, Lynn calls us all the time. There's things that we do all the time, and we don't bill you for that stuff during the year. We'll do, you know, whatever it takes for you guys to have the best information to make your decisions. So if you look at this, this is just kind of what was given to us, so we ran it so that you could see the debt capacity. We've got this year's bonds that you're going to consider. We have an amount for the notes, for the library notes, which was like $1 million in project costs, right, Lynn?
I think that was. the
And
estimate
just
we were
real
going with at this
conservative
point.
issuance expenses again, okay? Park notes, there's a park component. The reason we split it is because our actual model allows us to uncheck things, so that, you know, I didn't have to do much with this page, except check a box to get all 4 things to show up. Otherwise, I uncheck them and I am back to the one that I presented before. And then we threw in basically the same Just Street project, no refunding, out in 2022. And if you take a look at the graph, which, okay, the top section that's blue, oh, I gave you a color this time, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Sorry, sorry, thinking you're still black and white. The blue is your line that the state lets you issue debt up to. So that is your statutory debt limit. The red line is your self-imposed 75% debt limit. And then the green line would be, if we go ahead and do these projects, that this is a conservative, you know, approach to those numbers that we have in as to where you would land if you did it. And as you can tell, you still see some red in those years where those projects hit. You know, the only thing would be is maybe your library ends up being more expensive and you decide to levy or borrow more because somebody wants something else and you say yes. And that's the only reason that would make that debt limit be a little bit worse. That comparison.
Can I just back up a minute?
Sure.
2020 bonds.
Yeah.
That's just a potential
The 22s?
2022,
Yeah, so we just threw another street project out there just to show you how things looked. If you have another 3rd Street kind of thing, I know that was a flooding issue for you, but you know, if there's other ones in the village that you may
yeah.
want.
Chance.
Yeah,
Yes.
at least some more major
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah. So we wanted to at least throw that out there as a possibility. And you know, if you've got other projects, because a lot of times what our clients will do so that we can kind of give you a longer term look at that rate and that debt capacity is they'll give us 5 years worth. And I think these are the things that were on Lynn's radar. But maybe you as a board have other projects that you want to see the modeling, and that doesn't take us a lot of work to do. So, and that's something we could do anytime for you.
And just so everybody, these are projects that we know will hit general obligation debt, and that will affect the debt capacity that the village has. We know that there are utility items that will be revenue debt that are outside of this, but they won't go against the
And it could be in those years where those other revenue debt things are, that the portions that are included in this 2022 that are sewer and water, maybe they would go with the revenue debt and we wouldn't have to include them in that. But at this point, we're using those numbers in that number and it still shows that you have some capacity, so.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, if you have a revenue debt, it's still impacted, and still impacts your debt capacity?
No.
No.
Okay,
No, we're
That's
revenue,
why we didn't show those on.
yeah, revenue debt looks at revenue coverage,
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
so then you wouldn't.
yeah. So then it's more geared to, do you have enough revenues to cover those payments? So, if you have any questions on the pre-sale report or even on what I passed out last, I'd be happy to answer those. Looks like some of my math wasn't so good. So. Luckily, it didn't have a real big impact, but Lynn's special assessments will help us a lot.
Well, and if there is a reduction in some of those fees too.
Right.
Looking at
Yep.
we're
And like I said,
1,000.
what we come in with is a conservative, not to exceed kind of a bid number that we take to the market. But when we get to sale day, all of those tighten up and they'll get reduced down to what they really are.
Reduce some of those fees, as you said. Over here.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and just so you know, we do run all the scenarios with like the state trust fund loan. We look at what bank interest rates are going at. And we're actually here to recommend what we believe from our analysis and from what we see in the market on what's the best deal for the village. You know, there's nothing that says that you couldn't turn our recommendation down. But, you know, I guess what you'd have to decide is are you looking to have the best interest cost, you know, what's the best cost of the financing, or whether being local is more important. But our job as municipal advisors, a municipal advisor has a fiduciary responsibility to you and you alone. We aren't here to sell bonds. We take your information to the market and underwriters bid on. If you don't have a municipal advisor and you had like an underwriter directly, which we've been seeing in a lot of communities, they care about their investors. They don't care about the village. And so you don't necessarily get the best price on those underwriter things. And I'm not saying banks, by the way, but underwriters that are, you know, if you have an underwriter putting this together for you, they don't care about you. They don't have a fiduciary responsibility to you. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors, and they try to structure things in a way that they get more people to buy. So what we're doing is we're putting them together so they're saleable and that they're at the best result that we think that you can get. And if a bank loan, and actually, you know, a bank loan and a state trust fund loan, sometimes they make sense, and a lot of times those are $1 million or less type of deals. But in this case, where we had a little higher issuance, that it made sense to do that, plus some of the coverage issues on some of the utilities, having it go out a longer term than a note would go made sense.
Then didn't we do a state trust fund loan once?
We've done a couple of them.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of.
Those rates
Small.
have really gone up.
I think
Smart
smart
core
core.
at 4.7.
Yeah, under 500,000.
Yeah.
We did a couple, I think on our 2015 street project, the storm sewer was a state trust fund loan. I mean, I think Ellers had looked at that and
Mhm.
suggested.
Yeah, and typically, if
Put
you
it
ask us
together
to take a look
differently.
at something, we'll tell you which one makes sense, and that's, you know, I talked to Dawn today, and Dawn Gunderson is, I guess, Jim's replacement, and I'm her backup. So if that makes sense.
She's Jim.
Yeah. So Dawn took over for Jim, and I took over for Dawn. But, you know, I talked to her today, and she said that, you know, a lot of the things she's been running lately, you know, the state trust fund loan and a lot of bank loans don't have a better cost than the competitive bid. But in some cases, it does make sense. And we will recommend them if they do, so. We always do that.
Okay, is there any more discussion with the board? Do we want to proceed or it's up to you?
I would move that we adopt resolution 1905, 1906, 1907, 1908, 1909, and 1910.
And then I think you might have to do a roll call on each one of them.
I asked Brian
Did you ask
Lancer, yeah, and he said if the board agreed to lump them into one motion, that was fine. We
What,
could
roll call?
lump them into one motion, but we should probably do roll call.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Borrowing for 2019 street project would be the rest of that.
second that for the sake of discussion, so then we can discuss.
But you're lumping these.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
voting on,
And
one
what,
vote will do all.
what they are, they were required because of the different sources of the funds to break each piece out. So you'll see one's for streets, one's for storm sewer, one's for the water piece, one's for the sanitary piece, and the other's the refunding piece. And then the final one brings it all together.
Yeah,
into
the reason that
one.
this is like this is because bonds is one of those things in the statutes that have to have a enumerated purpose. So there's only certain things that you could use bonds for, and they're laid out right in the statute, which ones they are. So Quarles is a little bit more picky about splitting them into separate resolutions. It's nice that they're able to lump it together, but the reason that they're separated out the way they are is because the statutes make that be that way. Bonds are a little bit on the weird side.
Always have.
But
So we have a motion and a second, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I guess we could do a roll call vote.
Barb,
Yes.
Peggy, Chuck,
Yes.
Petra? Yes. Roger?
Yes. Motion carries. 5-0. Okay, Dave.
do you need me for anything else?
So,
If you can send me the special assessment stuff, I can send you some new information if you want to share it.
I will give you that right now if you want to do that.
Okay.
I've got another one.
Do you want to maybe estimate how it comes in? That's great. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Drake.
Thanks, Dave.
Public Works, Public Safety, discussion consideration award of bid 2019 street project, Third Avenue.
So,
You gonna present?
yeah, I thought it was bad.
Do you want to present? Talk about anything, Joe?
Have you worked with them, Bill?
Ooh,
The draw?
Miguel?
The draw?
yes. Very good. And Pat highly recommends them too. Madrone was the ones that did, up here on, I believe it was Second Street. Second Avenue. They did Second Avenue and stuff like that up here, and Pat said they're a really good company to work with. So, they've done work in the village before. Belleville uses them. They're busy. I know for a fact.
It's a really good bid.
Yeah, it's a good bid.
And some of that is because we're local, and some of it is because they're gonna be working local, and they can beat them out for moving in equipment, and it doesn't cost us as much. Everybody else is coming in from a long ways away,
Yeah.
and we're gonna get charged for equipment movage.
Who did our last two projects, just out of curiosity?
We had Iverson do one, and that was
Oh,
a
that
bad
was
experience.
awful. Not a good experience.
Was that the last one?
I think
That's the last
That was
big
the
one.
last
I think
big
that was the
one.
last big one.
That was
That was-
Iverson and that was
When
Seventh
we were
Avenue.
hiring Brian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Seventh
Seventh
Avenue,
Avenue and
but then we
the
did
street.
Third Street.
Right,
But who did that
that
one?
street. They did both of them. Didn't they do all of that? No, we didn't do the second one.
I don't know.
Pretty sure they did all of that. Didn't we get?
They did the 2015 street project, but then in 2016, we did a bunch of stuff too.
Did they do those? I thought we were.
No,
Yeah,
no,
they
they
didn't
didn't
do
do
those.
those.
I wonder if Madrell did them.
Have a look. Yeah.
Was it the guy out of Dodgeville? Rule? Because Brian told me at one time Rule was in here working.
It could have been them
Jim
then,
Rule?
maybe, because we did Third,
He just told me
Third
never,
Street.
never again will he see Iverson
They were, that was,
Yeah.
We all say
we
it's
all
a
agreed on that.
I believe it. There's a lot of, took them a long time, and a lot of friction between
The residents and.
Pat Rank and him, and woof.
And the other thing that I found out is, from Madrell, is the foreman and everybody that'll be working on that crew are pretty much all locals. So their work depicts on the end product. So people that are locally in that, they are gonna try to do the best that they can possibly.
So that's good.
So I assume the financials have been taken care of for Pat's recommendation.
Yeah, as far as I know, we did all, that's all been done.
Nobody's going broke in the middle of the project. Except us.
We should be covered.
So we need a motion on that?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we award the bid for the 219 street project to Madrell Excavators.
I'll second
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Have you ever dealt with Madrell, have you ever heard of it?
that.
Ah, okay. They've worked with us before. There you go. Item 10, ad hoc facilities committee. Kate is going to give us a little update on our last meeting with Dimension 4.
Well, I thought I'd give a copy of the timeline to those that weren't there, because that's very full. You have it?
It's in the packet.
It's in the packet.
Oh, it is in the
No,
packet,
Mark.
great, I missed it.
I knew I'd seen it.
Forgot about that.
Yeah,
First you had it.
I thought I looked, but apparently not, I was getting tired. At any rate, you see the timeline in both places. And so Jim Gersich gave a very thorough presentation of his plan, getting ready, kicking it off right away. And starting with looking at the plans for the building and evaluating the site and what's here now and when it was put in and looking at all the blueprints and all that. And then moving on to the talking with departments and getting space needs. And then looking at the conditions of the systems, all that, so you can see, very week by week, really moving ahead and getting this done within the 6 weeks that he had proposed and has it all planned out. So he'll be meeting with the ad hoc committee at least one more time. He proposed he could twice, so it depends on whether we.
It seemed like a very deliberate process, and
Yeah.
I thought we
He
had
asked for
some
our
nice
input, he
sense.
said we could contact him anytime, so.
The library met with him yesterday, and the rest of the departments are scheduled for Thursday this week.
Great. Good. So we just, any questions?
Yeah, just nothing serious, just vis-a-vis, I think we said, or you said, our last study was done like 15 years ago. And I'm just curious,
Right.
I'm just curious if we've had any big changes since then. Facilities, I can't think of any, but
I don't think anything's changed in here in the last 15
you
years.
didn't get an office. and We didn't get an office.
That's right.
The last thing we did was remodel
Our new chairs
site.
or-
North side.
And that was in 2000,
Yeah,
99, 2000. So that's more than 15 years ago.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious if I.
Yeah.
And the restrooms, I don't know, when did they did a
Oh, yeah,
little
we
work
did
in the
remodel
restrooms?
those a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago now.
What was that?
Longer than that.
We just
Oh,
put
Just
that
updated the restrooms.
Yeah,
That's
just retile.
According to Jim, they're out of, out of.
Well,
we just-
when you start working with the building, then he
Mhm.
talked about what you had to do in restrooms for air exchange
Exchange.
quality and things, so there's
Yeah,
changes
well,
there.
that's the one
It's
thing
all
that has
good.
changed. Is
Yeah.
I think they were just redoing
Codes.
Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned a few of those, and so I see this, yeah, but we're very good.
That's where we're at, and
Yep.
Oh, and then we did schedule a meeting, are we having that meeting on the 18th of March?
I'm old.
Were you able to do that? Okay, then I
Great.
think we're good for the 18th.
yes.
At 6 o'clock, Peggy.
Is that, what day is that?
Monday.
That's a Monday, yeah.
You have something?
I just, this came in the mail, maybe last week. So the league is going to have that local government 101, and some of you have attended that in the past. Madison is May 31st, if anybody's interested in attending that.
I'm sorry, it is the 18th.
Let me know.
Yeah.
I'll hang on to it.
Yeah,
Till then.
Monday the 18th.
It's in Madison.
It's in Madison.
Yeah.
Okay, any other business? Hearing none, we are adjourned.